If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?
Welcome to lesson number 4. Today we're going to talk all about parenting. You see, when two people love each other, no, not that kind of parenting, okay? We're going to talk about After Effects parenting, which is all about linking layers so that they can move together, essentially, okay? It's about establishing relationships, physical relationships between different layers so that one layer can drive the animation for another layer, all right? It sounds kind of confusing, so I think the best thing to do is to jump into After Effects and I'll just show you what the heck I'm talking about, all right? All right, here we are, and I've set up a little example to help demonstrate this. I have 3 different layers here. I have a parent and 2 children. But before we actually get into what this is about, I need to explain a couple other things, as is my way. So right now, this timeline is not set up to work with parenting, and you need to kind of press a couple of buttons and figure out where the parenting actually is first. So I don't know if you've noticed these buttons down here, but these are actually pretty important in terms of what information they show in my timeline. For example, if I click this on, which is probably how your After Effects defaulted, you'll see this is our little shy individual layer switch, and then here's the continuous rasterization button, etc. Some of these things we've already talked about, right? Additionally, if you press this button, you show a different little panel here, which shows kind of like transfer modes, like the ones you have in Photoshop, and this T for transparency, and this track matte thing, none of which makes that much sense to you so far. And don't worry about that because I haven't explained it at all. I'm just saying that's what you see when you press that button. And then when you press this button, you see this sort of in and out and duration and the stretch of a layer and stuff. Now, the reason that there are 3 buttons here is because this is pretty precious real estate here. Oftentimes, animators want more of their timeline to be seen so that you can kind of like collapse these things up, right? So that kind of makes sense. And we only need to show this one, I guess, or I don't even think we were going to need to show that one. So you could turn that all off for this lesson if you want, or maybe not. But the main thing that you have to find if you don't see it already with any of those buttons is the parenting switches, okay? And I've set this up so I'm not seeing that, so I can explain to you just how to reveal that, which is if you right-click, okay, there's this little line here which kind of allows you to stretch this out, and then to the right of that, there's this little blank space, okay? If you right-click in that space, you'll get this columns thing, and then if you find in columns, if you go down to parent, and then select that, now it will open this parenting tab, which is actually really important. I don't think it's really a tab, it's just part of this window now, okay? Now that I've explained that, let me go on to show that normally when you have layers, they don't have any particular relationship to one another. When you move one around, the others stay in the same place, right? But with parenting now, what we can do is we could link, for example, child 2, and what we could do is link it so that when the parent layer moves, the child 2 layer moves with it, okay? And the way that we do that, there's 2 ways. The easiest way to go is to grab this little pick whip thing here. That's this little spiral. And if you grab that and click on it and now kind of move this around, you can see that I've got like a little blue line that's going to go wherever my mouse goes as long as I'm holding this down. And what I want to do is I actually want to drag this up so that I'm highlighting the word parent here. And now you can see that it's kind of connected. And I'm going to let go. And now child 2 under here, under parent, says layer number 1, parent, okay? So the other way that you could have done that, if I undo, I'm just Command Z, undo there, you could also just find this tab and pull this down for child 2 and just link it this way to parent 1. It's the exact same thing as pick whipping. Pick whipping, okay? So whatever you prefer. A lot of people prefer this little pick whip. And the funniest thing is if you try to pick whip a layer to itself, you get this cool little like funky animation of the pick whip, which I like. Wow, I like that, right? So yeah, so just make sure child 2, for example, to parent 1. Now, when I click on parent 1 and I grab it, you see I'm moving both. And I don't have to select child 2. I just select parent, and now I can move it around. And the other thing is I'm going to undo both of those. Is this parenting affects most of the basic transform properties for any layer, right? So you remember what those were if we twirl down this arrow and we twirl down the transform. Now, anchor point is a special case, so we're not going to think about that. But parenting influences position and scale and rotation, but not opacity. Okay? So, for example, I do need to press this now to show my my values here. So I need to press this, right? Otherwise, I couldn't see those values. So make sure that if you turn that off, you turn that back on. My bad. So now, if I move the position, since they're parented, of my parent layer, the child too moves with it. If I scale it, it scales with it, right? And finally, of course, if I rotate it, it rotates with it. Now you'll see that the child rotates around the anchor point of wherever it's been placed for the parent layer, okay? So that's kind of an important thing to remember. So parenting is really, really, really useful. And let me go on to explain one further point about this here in this example, okay? So like I said earlier, this is about establishing a relationship. So I linked child to parent when they were still, when everything was just lined up as it was in the center, the way that I designed it, right? But if I had just say an animation on my parent, just say it, okay, let me unparent this. Okay, I'm going to go up to the tab and just pull that down and to none, right? So if I take my parent and I move it down here and I create an animation where I start here and just say over 1 second, it goes up to the top here, right? Now, no matter, and this is really like critically important thing about parenting, okay? In an animated layer situation, you have to remember that where you parent one layer to another is crucially important for establishing the relationship. In other words, you're telling After Effects, at this point, at this frame, whatever the relationship of these objects are that I'm parenting, it's going to keep it that way, okay? So for example, if I parent child, let me just work with child 1. If I parent child 1 to my parent now, okay, now the relationship is this distance. So as parent moves, the child moves in relationship with it, right? Now I'm going to undo this for 1 sec. And if I undo it and it's not parented, obviously, it just moves like this. Now if I were to go to this end and I parent now the child to the parent, right? Now this is the relationship that they have, okay? So as I move my parent, now it moves like that with it, okay? And they're always stuck together in the way that they were when you did the parenting. That's kind of critically important to remember because you can unparent or parent, but it's kind of a binary stage with layers, right? You can't just like animate something and have it parent and then kind of turn the parenting off for a sec and have it move independently and then turn the parenting back on. Like if you want to do that, you have to kind of split the layer up and it could get really confusing. So definitely be careful about when and where and how you set this parenting relationship, okay? So let me take off the second keyframe, okay? And let me undo that, and I'm just going to undo till I have it back here, okay? So now, like I said, these two have this relationship. But that does not have anything to do with the relationship that the child too would have once you link that to the parent, okay? Then you create those two having their own relationship to one another, okay? So it's very, very, very specific, and you have to watch out because if you want these just say to like line up more evenly like they did in my initial little test that I showed you, right? You get the parent, I'd have to navigate to the parent's about back in the center like where it was, right? And then I can parent child 2 to the parent. And now those two are linked like that, whereas the other one's up there, right? And similarly, if this were to rotate or whatever, they would all rotate in the given relationship that they now have. Okay, so that's really, really, really crucial for understanding parenting. And I think you get that now. Cool. So that's just a basic overview of parenting. Let's get into a little bit more of a complex example now, okay? And we'll talk about what's known as a parent chain. That's when layer A is parented to layer B, and layer B is parented to layer C, etc., which can definitely get a little bit more complicated than everything just being parented to one layer, okay? So here in this example, I've set up a little solar system, wildly out of scale, obviously, okay? So I'm not a scientist, nor do I even play one on TV, But here we go. I've got a sun, and I've got an earth, and I've got a moon, okay? And obviously we all kind of have a sense of how this works, which is that the earth rotates around the sun, but the earth is also rotating around its own axis, and the moon is rotating around the earth as the earth rotates around the sun, and the moon is also rotating or revolving or whatever it is, again, not a scientist, around its own center as well. So we're going to kind of establish that kind of a chain, all right, where the earth revolves around the sun as well as around its own center, and same with the moon, with the earth, okay? So I imported this as a composition and I retained layer sizes, okay? So the anchor point is already set into the middle of these layers, just where you'd want it to be, okay? Definitely when working with parenting, of course, and with rotation and scale, you always want to make sure to set the anchor point first, just so you don't have any surprises, okay? So like I said, the sun, the anchor point defaults to being in the center here, which is where we want, okay? So what we want to do now, we want, as the sun turns, we want it to also turn the earth around it in the relationship that it's pre-established, okay? So what I would do is I would parent my earth to the sun, right? So that when the sun rotates, like I said, the earth will rotate around it like that, okay? Hit undo. We also want the moon to be parented to the earth, okay? So now when the sun rotates, they both rotate around it like that. And similarly, when the earth rotates, the moon rotates around that, right? Okay, so far so good. And then when the moon rotates, it just rotates around its own center, which is probably hard to see here, but it looks like this, right? It's a little bit wobbly. Okay, so we've got the parenting chain established, which is the moon to the earth and the earth to the sun. Right? So all we need to do now, actually, is to make a rotation keyframe for all of these at the beginning. And then if we go down to the end, or let's just, 15 seconds is fine. And what we could do now is just say we could set something like, I don't know, 3 maybe, whole rotations for each one of these things. Now, right now, because they're whole rotations, it doesn't look like anything's happened, but I think the keen observers out there, like yourself, will notice that when I make a RAM preview of this, it should look something more like this. All right, so now you can see what's happening is each one's rotating. The sun is turning here, and that's why I put these little spokes on. The earth is turning, which is probably a little bit hard to see there, and the moon is also turning, and it's all rotating just the way it would in a kind of fake solar system like this, right? So right on. So that's kind of like a parent chain. And I hope that makes sense that one thing's parented to the next and another thing's parented to the next. If, for example, my moon was also parented to the sun, it would not look like what it just looked like. It would look like this. So there would be no really like good rotation. I mean, the Earth and the moon are both revolving around the center of the sun in this case, right? So it's a little bit less interesting. And it's also less true. All right, cool. So let's move on now to the example that I'm going to do, which is similar to your homework. I know I went over importing in great detail the other day, but let me just show this once again. Command-I, okay, and I'll find the project that I'm going to work with here, which is called Robot Arms. Yeah, you got that straight. We're working with robot arms, which everybody loves. I'm going to press Options, and I'm going to import this as a composition. And in this case, I'm going to retain layer sizes, okay? So I'm going to hit open. Great. Now it's up here and we can see all of the layers and it's not too bad. I'm going to double click on the composition to open that up. Okay. And like I said, we're going to be working with robot arms, which everybody seems to like, including myself. So it's sort of fun. And what we're going to do is we're going to rig these robot arms, okay, by using a combination of anchor point and parenting. And so that these robot arms will kind of work as arms, which is really neat. So what I'm going to do first is kind of explain that and how to rig these arms up, and then I'll talk about the animation and stuff. So let me just work with the robot arm 2, R2, okay, robot 2. And actually, let me color these layers real quick, because you know I like to keep things nice and neat. So all my robot 2 layers, I'm going to make yellow. All my robot 1 layers, I'm going to make, I don't know, blue. And then the boxes, I'll make one green, I'll keep one purple, and then I'll just change the background to like none or something, and then I'll lock that off, okay? So I'm ready to animate. And actually, let me turn off all of my layers except for one of these arms here. Oh, and I should say that the background layer contains these sort of, this like slot that the arms can move horizontally on, as well as this shelf here and this shelf here. And that'll kind of make more sense later. But that's why you're seeing this right now. Okay, so the way that I set up these arms is this piece, the top, okay, is arm 1, and this piece here is arm 2, and then we've got our wrist, which is kind of this piece, right? And then we've got these 2 fingers, the left and the right finger, and I think you can see which ones those are, right? So let's rig this and set this up for animation. This is pretty cool, okay? I'm going to zoom in a little bit and a little bit further, all right? And let's start with arm 1, okay? Which we can even solo this off if you want to see it just by itself, just so it's not confusing to you. Now I'm going to choose my pan behind tool here, or Y, obviously. I've been over this a million times. And now what we want to do is drag this up and put it right in the center there. Now, this is not the kind of thing we're going to be able to click into place by holding Command. So let's try to eyeball this first and see how close we can get it. All right, so I'm going to put it close, and then I'm going to zoom in like a whole bunch. All right, and now probably the best way to go here actually is to move this off. And it's a bit tedious, but I'm going to press Command R to show my rulers here on the edge of my comp window. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag rulers down, guides rather, so that this is in the exact center, which otherwise can be kind of tough. So I think the exact center is about there. And let me put this one. So you see, get rid of that. So you see here are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pixels, maybe 6, almost like there's another one there. So 1, 2, 3. So I think the center is right there. See that? So I will drop my guide there. And try to get it as close as you can. Right? And hopefully that's in the center. Sometimes it's hard to tell. And now what you can do is, with my pan behind tool still selected, I can grab the anchor point and kind of click this back in place. And that should now be nice and in the center. Okay? And I will also solo my arm 2, and I'm going to kind of do the same thing here. Now the guide that I put for the center is still there, so I can kind of, Actually, what I'm going to need to do now is lock my guides, which I go up to View and Lock Guides. Otherwise, as I try to grab this anchor point, I'm going to be grabbing that guide a whole bunch, which is irritating. And let me drag this and put this somewhere back up here. And now I can make a guide for this about there in the center, something. And now click this up so that that's in place. Okay, cool. So now these two have anchor points right in their little bases. And let me turn on the wrist. And guess what? I'm going to do the same exact thing, basically. Grab my wrist, and the anchor point for the wrist actually is very close to being in the center already. Let me quick guide here. Oh, it's perfect. Never mind. So that defaulted to being in the center, I guess because of the size and the way the layer laid out. Now, we get into the slightly trickier part, which are these 2 fingers. Let me turn these on for a sec. And actually, the way I'm going to show you these is I'm going to take my wrist layer, and I'm going to turn the opacity down on this so we can kind of see where the fingers and the wrist overlap. So I'm going to turn this down to 25%. And now you can still see it. Maybe I'll make that 50%. It's a little bit easier to see. Okay. And you can see here for the left finger and for the right finger, I built in these curved edges of overlap so that it can kind of turn and make a continuous edge, right? So what I'm going to do is choose my pan behind tool again, or Y. And now I could snap this to kind of keep it, holding down Command. So I'm keeping it central, left and right here. So I'm not, so it's symmetrical that way. And then I want to drop this just so it looks like it's kind of in the center of an imaginary circle right here, okay? Doesn't have to be totally precise, but what I think you should do is drop a guide here now that you've got that, okay? Wherever you picked. And now go over to the other finger and do the same thing and line it up on the horizontal with this guide, okay? So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to hold down on Command, so I'm keeping it in the center here, and then click it right there. So it kind of clicked in automatically. okay? So now when I rotate these, right, I can rotate them like this, and it'll kind of keep pretty good edge here. Like we'll see a little bit of an overlap there. Here, if I turn this back up to 100 now, you can see that this is pretty good. It's like a pretty good thing, especially when it rotates out. It's got a nice edge, and until it gets like way rotated in, I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so let me make this back to 0. So that's rigged. I mean, the anchor points are in place, but now we actually have to do the parenting, which is the whole reason for this lesson. Okay, so based on the Earth, Moon, Sun example, I think, I didn't really make this too clear then, but what's true is that you're pretty much always, like in this point, you're kind of going from the outside in the chain to the inside, if that makes sense. So in other words, it's kind of like the way you'd imagine it if you actually had to parent your real arm here, which is that the fingers need to be connected to the hand, to the wrist. In this case, we don't really have a hand, we have fingers and a wrist, okay? So the fingers need to be parented to the wrist, and the wrist needs to be parented to the arm 2, and arm 2 needs to be parented to arm 1, okay? So we're kind of going from the outside in, all right? So let's go ahead and do that. So robot 2 left finger, and robot 2 right finger, I'm going to select them both and pick whip and parent them both to the wrist, okay? And you could do that. You could select multiple layers, by the way, and then pick whip them. And now the robot 2 wrist, I'm going to pick whip to robot 2 arm 2. And arm 2, I'm going to pick whip and parent to arm 1. Okay? So now, this is really cool. Let me show the rotation of all these layers here, okay? So now, with arm 1, if this rotates, they all rotate with it, right? Just like you'd expect. But now, when I rotate arm 2, I can rotate it this way, and the wrist and fingers, obviously, will stay connected to it. And similarly, when I rotate the wrist, the fingers will stay connected to it. And I can also rotate the fingers now too, right? So that's pretty cool. We've built like an entire little arm system here. And if you ever want to reset it all back to the default position, go ahead and set 0 back for all these rotations, and it should kind of snap back into its point, right? Into its original position, I should say. Before I go on, I realized that I actually was doing something that I hadn't explained, so I really hope that wasn't confusing. Basically, what I was doing was I was using the hand tool, and the shortcut for the hand tool is the space bar. And I do this so often that I didn't even realize I was doing it, but let me just go back and explain that this tool right here is the hand tool. And it's the same in Photoshop and Illustrator, I believe. And if you click this, it allows you to move around on your screen without actually grabbing like my arm or any of these layers and stuff. This hand does not grab or select items. It just allows you to move around on screen, okay? And if I have my arrow tool selected, or V, and I press and hold down on spacebar, then I get my hand tool, and then I can move around my composition. So what I was doing was I was like all zoomed in on just say one part of this robot arm, and then I pressed spacebar and held down on it and moved the layer, moved in and around my screen essentially. And then when you let go, you get your arrow tool back. So that's really useful, and I didn't actually explain it, but I just started doing it because it's so natural to me. But the hand tool, especially with the V arrow shortcut spacebar, is just a really awesome thing for moving around on your screen. Cool, so we have 2 robot arms actually, so why don't I go ahead and rig up the other one just in case that wasn't completely clear on the first one, all right? So let me go ahead and just look at everything now. Okay, and I will look at what's actually robot 1. So robot 1, arm 1, I will set the anchor point here, click. Looks like the guides are slightly different for these 2 layers. I mean, the positions are slightly different, so the guides aren't going to work. So let me go up here to guide and clear my guides, okay? And I will go ahead and make one for the exact center of this again. Just making sure that it kind of lines up there. Looks good. And now I will make one here, about there. It's important to get these like pretty close to the center. And let me make all the guides first, then I can lock them, and then I will just snap everything in real quick. So I'm going to make a guide kind of here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. So it looks like it must be in the middle of that, like that. Something like that. And you can always change these guides later on if it absolutely doesn't work. That looks good. Okay, so now let me go up to view, and oh, my guides are locked already. Perfect. So let me grab arm 1. Whoops, robot arm. Robot 1, arm 1. Okay. And let me just snap this into place like that. Perfect. And let me grab arm 2. And move this up a little. And snap that into place there. Perfect. And wrist. Where's my anchor point for my wrist layer? Oh, sorry, that was wrist. That was robot 2. Duh. Robot 1. I guess I should have come up with more different names. More different names for these. Put that in place. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with the opacity, where I'll set this down to 50. And I will grab my left finger and command and move this kind of up. Somewhere like that. Looks pretty good. Remembering the center of an imaginary circle there. And I can make another guide there. Now grab this, pan behind tool, command, click this up till it's right there. Oh boy, that was fun. All right. And I'll set my wrist opacity back to 100. And now we need to parent. So everybody with me here? We take the left finger and right finger and we parent it to, that's right, the wrist. Okay. And then the wrist we parent to arm 2. And by the way, you do not actually need to move this to the name. I just find that's the easiest. You can actually just move it down to here, which is like the least amount that you could pick whip. And you can see R1, A2 is still lit up there. So I could like let go of that and now it's parented. I find it's easier to explain it by doing this because it sort of links to the name. All right, but you can just link up and down like that. Perfect. So now we have those two things rigged, both of our robot arms. And I believe we're ready to move on to our animation. Let's check that the boxes, yep, the anchor point wants to default to the center because I imported and retained layer size, so those are good. Okay, so before we actually start animating, let's talk about what needs to happen in this animation, because it's always really good to have a sense of what you're doing before you start, right? I'm going to turn off my guides now. I'm actually going to view and clear, and clear guides. Perfect. So this, I'm kind of imagining in my mind is kind of a looping little machine that I'm animating here, where this robot arm picks up this box and puts it where this one is, right? And this one, meanwhile, has been picking up that one and putting it down on this slidey shelf so that it rolls, not rolls, but just kind of slides down here into this position. And so essentially, they're just changing positions of these two boxes using the arms, okay? So it'd be kind of fun, right? So, all right, how do we start animating? Well, we have to start with one arm or the other, I guess. So let's just go for it. We'll do one, and then we'll kind of parallel do the other one once we're done with the first one, and we'll see if we can make them match up, right? So let's start with robot 1. And what I'm going to do, actually, is I'll just lock off my other layers, including box 2, just so that I know I can only be selecting these layers. We're really close now to being able to start animating our robot arms, but I just want to bring up 2 little points first, okay? For one, it's going to be really important at some point for us to establish a center line on these boxes, okay? Now, when I click on it, the anchor point defaults to its own center because I imported and retained layer sizes. When I have my arm, I want it to line up very much with the center because it's very symmetrical, and when it clamps, I want to be sure that the little dot here on the wrist is lined up exactly over this so that it can clamp symmetrically. So what I want to do is just quickly get in here and drop a guide right here on the center of my box. Okay, so now I know that this white point can line up with that line. And what I'm going to do is, okay, my guides are still locked from before. So great. So now I can explain the one other thing and then we can start animating. I forgot to mention that there's this kind of slot up here as well. And this is meant so that the robot arms can move. I'm going to show you. They can move along here as well, right? Because, you know, for this arm to put a box here, it's going to definitely need to move over because it can't just like reach over there. because the arms are of a fixed length, obviously, like real arms. I'm going to hit undo and put that back over there. Okay, so that's just so you know that we have rotation and position for the arm one layer that can be animated. All right, so that's just important. So what I'm going to do is select all these and press R. And actually, before I go, there's one other thing that I have to explain as well. It's such a tease. I'm such a tease. And that is these fingers. I don't think it looks very good in this boxy shape that I've defaulted it to, but it was the best way for lining it up so that I could kind of parent and rig it. But I actually would rather that it was pinched together to start with, like that, right? And that'll also make it cooler because when it moves over the box and gets ready, then one of the elements that we can animate is the fingers opening, which is kind of going to serve as like an anticipation so that we all know that the next thing that's going to happen is it's going to reach down and grab that box, okay? That will work better if we start out with the fingers kind of in a closed position. And I do want to explain about the fingers that, here, this is easier to show. If I rotate them together, they kind of do this, which that's not how I'm imagining these arms are going to work. This is a clamping arm, okay? So what that means is that when the left finger is at, just say, 24, for example, the right finger needs to be also at 24, but at negative 24. These always need to be opposed. Like one of them is always positive and one of them is always negative. And that's the way this gag works. So when this is negative 24, now it's like symmetrically widespread open. But now if this is negative 24, okay, and this one is now 24, now they're pinched together, right? So one's always negative and one's always positive. That's the way, but the rotation values are the same, just negative and positive, okay? So that's the other note there. So I'm going to keep it like this to begin with because I think that looks like a nicer, relaxed position than this. It just looks nicer. I don't know. And also I know that I'm going to need to open it up later. So let me go ahead and make rotation keyframes for all those layers right here at the start. Additionally, let me select my arm one, hit Shift and P to reveal the position property, and make a keyframe for that as well. There. And now I'm going to move forward in time. I'm going to hit Shift and page down, right? And now let me line this up so that it's above the box, okay? And there's obviously a bunch of different ways that we could do this. We can rotate. I suggest rotating from this to start, right? And probably over-rotate this a little bit. And then you can kind of rotate the arm 2. And here, arm 2 now is the one that's going to rotate, essentially, the wrist into the right place, right? So that's why I set that guide there. And I think I want more of a bend on this, actually, now that I look at it. So maybe that, and then I can move this down like that. Yeah. I wanted the arm like higher up a little bit so that it, again, when it moves down, it's going to be a more forceful action, right? And we do want to get this kind of centered here, which might involve, unfortunately, having to add some decimal places into this, unfortunately. So let's see if 51.5, now that moves it in the wrong direction, so I'm going to undo that. So basically what I want probably is 50.5, right? 50 point, let's say, 25. Went in the wrong direction. 0.7. Okay, perfect. Now the white dot, as you can see, is really closely, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close to being in the center. If it needs to be way more in the center, then we'll work that out later. Okay, so now let's look at what just this move looks like. It goes like that, right? Which is pretty cool. It looks like a moving arm, right? And additionally, what we need to do is add a wrist rotation. Now the wrist, it's kind of important, I think, to establish the sort of weight of this machinery, because these are supposed to be like heavy pieces here, not like made of straw, but they're made of like metal or something, right? So the wrist, I feel like, to show the weight of it, it always wants to be pointing pretty much straight down. So that it always feels like it's just moving and holding itself kind of straight down. That's sort of the way I would imagine that the weight of this would have to hold, okay? And that's looking pretty good. And remember, we could always, for example, we could copy and paste this position keyframe and go back to the beginning, and we could also move this further over on this slot so that this could also kind of have some position and rotation action, right? That's pretty nice. I kind of like that. So I think that's not a bad first move. And again, we'll worry about the timings of everything. I know this is my method, okay? I just make keyframes for all the poses. Later on, I endlessly fiddle with the timings until it looks just right for me, as you've seen me do now a number of times, right? So what a method. It's really fun. Now, this exercise is going to be a little bit like the very first one we did because there's going to be physical contact between things, all right? So, and also we want the action to be really clear. So when this moves up, just like in the first one, we need this to kind of pause for a couple of frames here because otherwise it'll just look wrong. It needs to move and pause. Another thing about a robot arm is that we can get away with animating it to look very robotic in its movements, okay? Because that's the way robots work, all right? So this is kind of a different example than a lot of other things that we'll try to animate in real life, which are fluid and, very human movement-like and kind of like physics or whatever. But in this case, robot arm, it's a pretty easy example, right? All right, so now we've got this moving up in position and pausing. And actually, I want to take my rotations for my fingers and put those here because now I want to make the animation where it widens out. Okay, so let me move 10 frames randomly. And I actually liked the reverse of this pretty well, I think, which this was 24 and this was negative 24. And that's a nice wide. Maybe that's too wide now that I look at it. Maybe let's make this more like 15, negative 15 and 15. Okay, it just doesn't look ridiculously spread out. All right, so now it kind of moves over and opens up. And now we're ready to... Basically, we want all these keyframes like they are, so we can go down and just press this to make new keyframes because the value hasn't changed, right? Now I'll move 10 frames. And now we want it to dive down on this, okay? So this is going to involve a bunch of motion, all right? And I think actually it's going to need to slide over even more this way first so that it's got the room. And now this, pretty much you want to rotate both. I think my gut feeling says that I want to rotate this so that this is kind of centered as well. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to rotate this until that gets kind of centered. It doesn't have to be exact in this case, like with the wrist, because I have the wrist to compensate for this. And let me swing the wrist back now. I'm sorry, swing the arm 2 back now so that this kind of gets there. And this now I'm going to have to work with some decimal points or something because... This way it's too far, so yeah, 0.7. I don't know, let's try 0.5 in this case. Yeah, okay, great, that put it back. And let me rotate the wrist now so it looks like it's facing down again, which in this case is actually kind of easy to figure out because these two bounding box points, the top and the bottom one, should actually then line up with the exact guide, right? Somehow, something like that maybe. Yeah, that doesn't look so bad. Okay, so this now moves over, opens up, and kind of moves down into position, right? And now, of course, we want the fingers to clamp on it. So what I'm going to do is take these two layers, and I'll click on this button here to make new keyframes of the value that they used to have, and I'll just randomly move 10 frames, and let me now kind of figure out where this needs to clamp down to. Get in a little bit closer here. Okay, so that's at -9. So let's put this at 9 and see what that looks like. Now, because the box is actually at an angle, you might need to rotate. I think I'm going to need to rotate this finger over a little bit. Basically, we want it to look like it's clamping it right on the edge there. Okay, so the other thing that we could have done is we could have had the robot arm come at the box on the angle that it was at. I didn't really think about that until now, which might have been more pro, but in any case, I'm not going to undo this animation. So I like this, so it moves down and kind of clamps on it, okay? And let's actually, I'm going to set my work area to end there, and let's just watch this down. All right, well, that looks really fun, I think. Obviously, the timings are a bit messed up and whatever, but let's just get the beats of the animation down, and then I'll fiddle endlessly with the timings, okay? I will try not to fiddle with the timings too bad, all right? So it goes in and rather than clamps down. Okay, so now we need to get into a different kind of parenting. And the fact is that now when this arm picks up, the box needs to now move with it, right? In other words, the box needs to be parented with some part of the arm so that it kind of picks up and moves with it, right? Like I just said. But before this, the box shouldn't move with the arm, because just say we parent now the box to the arm. And let's just say we parent it to the wrist. I think that's what we want. Okay. Now it's parented to it, so we could like move on and do the rest of the animation with it connected, right? But unfortunately, what that means now is we've established a relationship between the two. So now it's moving with the arm in a way that we don't want it to. Okay, so let me undo that so it's not parented. All right. So now we need to learn something new about After Effects, which is really awesome, which is a function called split layer. And what that allows you to do is split a layer, okay, like the name suggests. And if I split my box layer now, okay, I'm going to hit Shift-Command-D, which is a little bit like the duplicate keyboard shortcut, which is Command-D. So in a way, this kind of like duplicates the layer and has one start. Here, I'll show you what it does, and then you can figure out how it relates to Command-D, duplicate. Shift-Command-D, okay? So it duplicates the layer. It now named it Box 3 because we have a Box 2 already, and After Effects is hella smart, just like you. And so what it's done is it split the layer wherever my CTI was, okay? And if there was animation on this, we would see it on both layers, because it really did split, it really duplicated that layer and then trimmed one here and the other one there, okay? So now, if this now, the second one, which is called Box 3, is parented, just say, to my robot wrist, and I haven't made the animation yet, but if just say I have an animation here where this now lifts up, and, okay, so let me actually go ahead and do this. So let me copy press that button to make keyframes for all these layers now. And we can rotate this, and I'll go 10 frames, and we'll rotate this up, and you'll see it at work. Boom, now it's moving with it, okay? And let's just say that's the animation that we want, even though it's not. And now you can see how the split layer thing works in action. Let me zoom back, and let's preview this so you can see that. Okay, so I think you understand now the relationship between the parenting and the split layer. But just to go over this again, so this box 1 layer is not parented, and then, so this reaches down, and the moment that it kind of touches it, and when I need it to move with it, I split the layer, and then I parented this, what's called box 3, which is really box 1 part 2, right? I parented that to the wrist so that it would always kind of turn with the wrist, because that's kind of the thing that it's touching the most, in a way. Not really the fingers, which are the ones that are actually touching it, but the wrist is kind of what determines the rotation of this. So I thought that would be good. Now, this keyframe I put in just for demonstration, so let me get rid of that. And I kind of want this to be pulled kind of straight up, and I kind of want to avoid it hitting this shelf as well. So this is going to be a little like of a ballet-like movement. But let's go ahead and first thing I'll do is I'll kind of rotate this up a bunch, like it's kind of compressing like an arm, right? And then I'll kind of counter rotate this up a bunch as well. And then finally I can kind of rotate my wrist down so that it looks, I really think it's important to have the wrist so that it's always kind of hanging down to some degree or other. So then that would look kind of like this. It's sort of like it just lifted it up, right? And then, actually, I don't need a position keyframe here, but I think what I should do is move this position keyframe over a little bit so that after this moves up, this now can basically just move over. And I don't know how long this is going to take, but it'll probably take a little bit. But what I need to do now is to click on the, actually unlock box 2, and now the center point's in this, the anchor point is in the center of that layer. So let me go ahead and make a guide so that I can set it exactly there. And remember, this box won't actually be here. I'm going to turn it off because the other arm will have picked it up and moved it away already by this point, hopefully, if we do this right. So, okay, so this kind of picks this up and moves over like that, right? And now we need it to kind of move over real close so that the wrist is in the center there. And that should be good, and we can kind of look at that. Let me pull back here and we'll look at that so we can kind of get a rough sense of the timings. Okay, well, it's looking pretty good. I think when the arm pulls up, this is too fast, and when this moves over, this is too slow, and it's whatever. But let's just get all the pieces in place first, and then we'll move on to my favorite part, which is fiddling endlessly with the timings. So okay, so it pauses here, and now it basically just needs to put it down. So let's have it move forward a couple frames, and I will, I guess, copy and paste these rotation keyframes here on the wrist and the two arm parts. And now I'll move forward like 10 frames. Let's whatever, just say. And we want this to be placed just on the ground with this basically centered here. So let's see, what's the best way to do that? We can unfold it a little bit in each piece. Oops, not that. So we can rotate this down a little bit. We're gonna have to fiddle with this to get it just right. So let's see. Rotate it back up, rotate this back up. We're sort of looking for like an exact position. That's not too far from it. Let's see, if I've turned the wrist like that. Now, that's not too bad actually. We could probably cheat this by, let's see, so this lands pretty close actually. So what we could probably do is cheat this by copying the position and just sort of having this slide over a little bit here. Cheat it in. Okay. And in fact, it doesn't look like it's quite down, which is going to be annoying. So that might mess everything up. But let me rotate this, like just a little bit. Let's see, maybe I can get away with just my arm too. Yeah, baby, yeah, I think so. Okay, so let's make this an even value so we don't have decimals in there just yet. Okay, that looks pretty good actually. And now I just need to recompensate my wrist rotation a tiny little bit so that it's flat. Yeah, that's not so bad. Yeah, I believe that that's down on the shelf there. Okay, so now the important thing to remember is, again, we have to now unparent this, right? So box 3, which is our box 1, part 2, now has to become a box 4, which is really box 1, part 3. I think that was a very confusing way to say it, but I think you get me. So that now here, basically, I can split the layer, and so that's Shift Command D once again to split. And now if I unparent it or parent it to nothing, now I can, move my arm and it won't be grabbing that box, right? So that's cool. So I need to now, let's see, I need to a little bit of a pause, and let me make keyframes for all these. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, total lie. What I need to do first is have the fingers separate, right here. So let me make rotation keyframes for my left and right finger to move 10 forward. Again, the timings will be changed. And let me now widen, one at a time, widen this out to like here. It doesn't need to be too exaggerated. And now hopefully we can get these back into symmetry again. Yep, so that's 3 and -3 in case you didn't see that. So it sort of opens it. And now, even maybe while it's opening it, it could be moving up. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So let me make keyframes there, move another 10, and let's just have this sort of pull up a little bit. So I will rotate this up and rotate this down. Did that work? Yeah. All right. And that was only, so we could see if we could maybe have that work at the same time as this, as the fingers opening. So it's like one move. I don't know. I don't think it's necessary. I think once we get the timings right and it's not so clunky, it'll work fine. Let's actually check that out. Yeah, so obviously there needs to be a little bit more of a pause here, I think, before it starts letting go. And then this could probably be quicker. I don't know. almost looks like maybe it should be one move. I'm driving myself crazy again. Let's see, if I take this, put this back here. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably better. And it's just awkward because they're of different timings now, so yeah, I think that's good. The fewer the moves that you can have it do, really, probably the better. Okay, and so now all we need to have is for it to move back over there where it started. So I'm going to copy the position keyframe, and I'll move forward, I don't know, like 20 or maybe a second. And I will now dial this back to be where it was when it started. Or I could even I could just copy and paste that from the beginning if I want, knowing that it's probably going to go somewhere over there again. Or you know what? Actually, even smarter, knowing that this arm has already probably put this other box over there already, let's just have it, rather than it return to the start position, let's just have it go and get ready to kind of like dip down and grab that box right there, okay? That'll be there in a sec once we animate that. So this end of this move here is a little bit rough till we figure out the other end of this, okay? So let me go back to the beginning and hit home and B, and let me preview the animation entirely for that arm, all right? Cool. So it completes the first part of the cycle, so that's fine. I do think that we want to adjust some of these timings to just make it a little bit snappier in some places. Remember, these were all pretty much just 10-frame kind of arbitrary guesses. So like at the beginning, I think that's too long. Oh, and by the way, once we do this, it's going to mess up where our layers split, okay? So this is actually a really great step that I'm going to take here because, you know, I'm going to kind of have to break this before I can make it work better with better timings, okay? So just be careful to notice where these split layers are happening, and I will try to walk us through this, okay? So I think when this moves up, it's a little bit too fast. It's kind of our establishing motion, and it's heavy. It's kind of coming from a, you know, we have to remember the weight of this. If this thing moves too fast, it'll look really light and lightweight and a little bit silly. We don't want that. It kind of has to have a deliberate motion to it, right? So actually, it didn't mess up this split layer too bad, although it's actually pretty funny. It splits right there and it makes it look like it's dropping it, which is pretty awesome, but that's not what we want. So let's see. I like this pretty good so far. I think that when the fingers pinch down, that's too slow. So let me take all these keyframes, just move these up a little bit, see what that's like. Okay, great. Now, I think that's good on that. It could even be faster. But this certainly, this pause, maybe a little bit too long, and maybe just a few frames. And then this here, I definitely think is too fast. Okay, and it looks like the split layer, I'm getting lucky that it actually, now you want to make sure that I think this works perfectly. I take that back. What I was about to say, which was that I can kind of cheat this, but no, that's a bad way to teach. So I'm going to split this here, right where, you know, the fingers in the hand kind of touch it, and I move back one, and let me trim this so that it, you know, backs up into that one frame. All I did was I adjusted it by one frame. Okay, cool. So it picks it up, and I think this now was too fast, I said. So let me take this and make this a little bit slower. Too slow, split the diff a little bit. Yeah, okay, good. And I think we also need a pause here, a little bit more of a pause. And this can go a little bit faster, possibly. So rather than preview this whole thing, I'm just going to hit B there. It's a little too fast. Okay, fine. You can see that the layer, the split happens. It's actually pretty cool because it looks like it drops, but that's not what we want again. So I just need to now edit this back so that here, when it puts it down at this frame, this is where we want the split to happen. So I'm going to option and bracket, left bracket, trim that there, and I'll go forward one and option and right bracket this one there, and that should fix the problem. right? We just needed to adjust, where it starts and stops. So I think that works now. And of course, I could fiddle with this to death. I'll try not to do that. Yeah, the only thing is maybe, and then I'm going to fiddle with it. Once it puts it down, I think it just needs a little bit more of a pause before it starts moving. And I think that's fine. Cool. Great. So preview it one more time, and then we'll work on the other arm. So what I'm going to do is select all, Command A, and then collapse these down. And I'm actually going to lock these layers now by pressing that with them all selected. And let me unlock box 2 and turn it on, and unlock all of my robot 2 layers. Okay, cool. So we are ready now to start animating, except for I do want to explain one thing, as always, which is that basically I don't like these straight position for this arm for 2 reasons. One, because it's in front of this shelf, which ruins the illusion a little bit, I think, that these are all physical objects together that are kind of mounted to some sort of wall system to make sense. And secondly, I just think this is a boring pose for it. I think I'd like it to be more ready, kind of like, so it doesn't have to like straighten out to get into a position, but just so it's kind of already in that position, ready to go. All right, so we're all rigged, but I do want to get the fingers together as well. I kind of like that clamped position. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll press R, and I believe it was -24 and 20. Oops, and 24. Okay, perfect. But let's get this in a good position first. So I'm going to press R for all these layers. And what I think is I kind of want this sort of posed and ready to go, like I said. So in my mind, that means I kind of want to rotate this back a little bit, and then this kind of forward, right? Because this is just going to kind of move across here and grab this box, right? So this looks pretty good. I could even maybe rotate this further up this way, and this even up this way. It's just kind of like a ready position, and maybe even the wrist is like a little bit up that way, which looks kind of cool, right? So it's just sort of hanging there, ready to go. So let me make a rotation keyframe for all these by clicking on the stopwatch. And additionally, I'm going to select the arm 1 and hit Shift P and make a position keyframe. So now we got all of our keyframes here and a good start pose. So let's move forward like 20 frames and have this kind of move over. Oh, and let's see. What I want to do is actually kind of clear my guides. And I want to click on this now and make a guide position for the center of this. I think I might have had one of those in place from before, but I just cleared that, so it doesn't matter. Easy peasy. I just set this back here. Perfect. Okay. And great. So let me now move this over some. Okay, so it's going to move over and maybe unfold a little bit. And I think also the wrist can kind of turn down. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's not one move. Let's see. Oh, that's kind of cool. I sort of like that. But I see now that this, it's going to be a little too close to the box. So why don't I take the rotation off here that I put on and actually have that rotate up a little bit. And then I can have the wrist turn down like that. So it's about even or flat or, parallel to this box. And now I just need to move this over again so that this is kind of centered. Remember, this wrist point is kind of centered there. That looks pretty good. I don't think we have to go nuts. So let's see what this looks like just by kind of moving through it. Right, pretty good. It's kind of like, and maybe even, maybe this could be, this could be down a little bit more at the start. Let's see what that looks like. Kind of like that. It's got a little bit more movement to it, so it's like really, really focusing on that box right away. Okay, we could even watch that down if I press N. Yeah, I like that. I think it's too fast or whatever. That's pretty cool. Definitely robotic looking. Great. So now that it's over it, let me move a few frames, and I'll take these rotation keyframes that I set for the fingers, and I will just drag these here because I don't need them to do anything first. So Let me move like 5 frames or 6 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And open those out. I think that was 15 and negative 15 from before. Yep. It's a little bit wide, but whatevs. Okay, and now we need to... Okay, so I'm going to need to make keyframes for all these at their current positions, values, and move ahead 10 frames. And now this needs to kind of reach down and grab this thing, right? So let's start by rotating this down a little bit and this down. No, actually, take that back. I need to rotate. Let's start with this. This needs to rotate down enough. And the wrist needs to recenter itself, yeah. And now maybe it's more interesting if the arm 1 also does some movement too, because right now it's just it's kind of like just a simple move with one part of it, but it might look cooler if 2 parts of it kind of rotate at the same time. So let me just do a little bit of rotation there. And of course that messes everything else up. That's too much. Maybe I'll rotate this up a little bit, and then I can rotate this. That. No, that's going to mess it up too. Maybe I just have it move down. Yeah, let's not worry about that for now. The the spacings, I should say, on these are a little bit funny on this shelf because it's so tight there, so I'm not going to really worry about that. But it moves down, okay? And now let me give it a couple of frames, and I'll copy and paste these keyframes here. A note, you might have noticed that you can't, if I delete these keyframes, you might have tried this already, and this is definitely something people do when they first start out on After Effects, and it seems like it should make sense, but it doesn't work, which is, I want these 2 keyframes here, so I'll just select them both and copy and paste, which unfortunately what that does is it pastes whole new layers, because you can't copy and paste keyframes from multiple layers into multiple layers at the same time. That's why I keep doing this and pressing this button, because that you can do real quick. You can't copy and paste. So if I wanted to copy and paste this, just to belabor this point, I'd have to do these one at a time. Copy this one there, and then copy this one there. All right? There are third-party tools that you can purchase to allow you to copy from multiple keyframes from multiple layers at the same time and paste them, but that's way advanced here. So just do them one at a time, or press that little button on the side on the left there. Okay, moving along. Move 10 frames, and now let me clamp these fingers in, right? So let me figure out a good value for this side. So, looks like 9 is pretty good, maybe negative 9.5. Yep, I like that. It's just sort of touching a little bit more. Let's see if 9.5 works on this side. Yeah, looks pretty good. So, all right, so it comes in, opens, moves down, and clamps. Perfect. And now, I think everybody knows what has to happen now, I hope, which is that now that these fingers are touching the box and we've established contact and we want it to now move with the robot arm, we need to take box 2, right, and split it, which is Shift-Command-D. Boom. And now we can parent this one to, I'm going to go ahead and parent it to Robot 2 wrist. I think the wrist is the good place to parent to. Boom. So that happens. And now I can move forward a little bit in time, and I can now start my rotation of this. So let's go ahead and make some keyframes for the wrist, arm 2 and arm 1 for the position. And now I'll move like 10 frames again. And so first we just pretty much want this to kind of pick this up, right? So we could kind of probably just take these keyframes here and paste them one at a time, like I was just saying. So let me move forward 10 and copy and paste this, copy and paste that, and copy and paste that, right? Actually, I don't think that position really did anything there. So I don't need to copy and paste that. Yep, cool. And we'll clean up these extra keyframes that we have here later. So basically now this position keyframe probably needs to come down here somewhere, because now it's going to kind of 1, 2, slide. And now you see this move, this needs it to get out of the way. So this is kind of perfect. So now this is going to kind of slide over somewhere like here, right? Picks it up, moves over, and we probably want it to move over enough, actually, now that I think about it, so that there's no like collision between these two arms. So let me drop a quick guide that just sort of shows where the edge of this elbow is here, so I have some sort of reference for that. And I can just move this over a little bit more, actually, I think. So, because the arm's going to be unfolded as well, so as long as it's not touching, this arm will be down, okay, so I think that'll be fine here. Okay, so that moves over, and 1, 2, 3, maybe a whole second for that to move over. It's more parallel with the other one, right? And I could even potentially have them move at the same time if that looks cool. Now we just need this to unfold, right? And drop that little box on here, which will slide down. All right, so let's have it, let's do the unfold. This might be slightly tricky to get it just right, but we can sort of move that down a little bit to begin with, and that down. And I think what we want to do is get this close here, just kind of faking it. And then we do definitely need this to become very parallel with this shelf. So that's close, but I'm off by a little. So let's see. Oh, and I totally messed this up, which is I forgot to put additional keyframes here for this. So let me take these. These are my rotation keyframes. Oh, I totally messed this up. Don't do this at home. So let me copy. Whoops, I hit Command X, which deleted it by accident. Copy and paste. Okay, copy and paste. And this value we haven't changed at all yet, actually. So I'm just going to take this. Yeah, maybe we did. Okay, so copy and paste that there. All right, so now I've just built that little polygon. Great, so now I can move it down. Teacher error there. I apologize. All right, so now we can get this so it's more precisely on the shelf. So let's see. I can rotate this up a little. Actually, that looked pretty good. Maybe I'll just rotate that a little bit more, and then I'll rotate the wrist. Yeah, I think I could do that. All right, so let me get in close here and just make sure that this is very parallel to the shelf, because that will look funky if it's not. Negative 68, did that look about right? Maybe negative 67. Sometimes, yeah, okay, cool. You just have to dial that one in. And let's actually look at all of that animation real quick. Okay, well, that's looking pretty good. I, of course, want to fiddle with the timings, but let's move on and get down to the next thing, which is that the fingers need to release and set this box scrambling down this, sliding down this so that the other one can pick it up, okay? So I'm going to copy and paste my finger position, move forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, and zoom in. And now let me widen these out. Something like that. I don't know, let's say 10 and negative 10. Okay, so it does that. Boop. Oh, and the important thing we have to do here now is unparent this box from this arm, okay, because it needs to now be independent. So I'm going to split the layer, that's right. Shift Command D, correct. Splitting it, all right, and now I will unparent that or parent it to none, okay. So now I can actually animate this. I think I'm gonna widen this out a little bit more and animate it lifting up and pulling the fingers apart at the same time, which I think will make it more visible and it'll just read better. So let's see. Let me press K to move to my next keyframes here. And now let me just pull this up a little bit. So let me rotate. Actually, what I'm going to do is maybe drop a guide real quick here just for myself so I have a sense of, you know, kind of where this was centered. Not that it needs to be exact, but just so it's not an awkward move. I'm going to rotate this up a little bit and this up a little bit. No, actually, undo. I'm going to rotate this back a little bit, all right, and this up a little bit. Sometimes it's tricky with these. And now maybe I've gone too far. Yeah, so remember I made that guide there. Okay, good. So now it's on that guide. And what I could do is rotate the wrist again so that it's sort of parallel with how it was. Boop, right? So it kind of pulls up and widens out, which is pretty nice. And we'll probably have to adjust the timings on that again later. Right now, as soon as it lets go, we kind of need this box to start moving, right? Now I want to show you a trick here that's going to be really useful. Now this box is not animated in any way other than being parented on and off for this robot arm, okay? So that's why I'm able to do this now. But what I want to do is a little trick that's going to help us have this slide perfectly parallel with this angle. Now lining things up on angles in After Effects can be a little bit tricky because you can't just sort of, hold down shift rather, and kind of move it perfectly along that line. So here's a little trick for that. I'm going to take my box, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the anchor point using my pan behind tool, or Y. I'm going to drop the anchor point down and click it into this bottom point right here, okay? And what that's going to do is allow me to, for now, if I hit P and click and make a position stopwatch, now with the anchor point at the bottom, it's going to be kind of a visual guide for me to see where this line is as I move it. So let me move forward 1, 2, 3. So I'm moved a whole second, because this is going to take a while for this to roll down here. And see now, if I grab this and move it, of course I've got this position path right here, which we've kind of talked about this before. That's showing, the beginning and end of the move and sort of the dots in between, showing kind of vaguely the speed of that. But you see, now I know I can make this position path as long as it's really, really parallel with the top of this line here of the shelf, then I know that it's moving parallel with the shelf, okay? So with the anchor point at the bottom, it's just a little bit easier to see that. So let me get this into position here and make sure that it's lining up with this and that this anchor point, the position path, is nice and steady along there, which it is. Perfect. So then if I widen out and preview this now, it should look like it's moving just right along that shelf. So here, let me set my work area here, somewhere in the middle, and let's preview this. Okay, so that's looking good. It just looks really fast now, I think. When it starts to move, it's just a little bit faster than we'd want. So let me just shove this back and hit N, and let's see about that. Yeah, and it's almost like now the hand, I think, probably needs to reach up a little bit faster. Remember, I set these kind of randomly. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So it's sort of starts to pull up, and we could get this a little bit better here because, it's like the moment it lets go, it should probably start to move, right? But the finger's kind of still in the way there, it's sort of hitting it. So what I might do is just now back this up and making sure that this stays really parallel to the ground, just kind of move it so that it's now parallel to the ground and just touching the finger there. And this might be more of a pain in the butt than what we had hoped for, but I might have to do this kind of again now. I might even need to copy and paste that keyframe there. Now it's gone a little bit farther, so we're definitely in some fiddling territory here, but just as much as possible making sure that these keyframes are all along that kind of straight line, which is pretty tough. Okay, finally there, now it can let go. Now, that was a whole bunch of fiddling. Let's check that again to make sure that that actually worked. Yeah, it's a little bit noticeable, a little bit unnoticeable at the same time. It looks like it has a little stutter, but I think technically it's probably fine because it's actually accurate the way it would work, right? It's sort of slowing it down a little bit at the beginning there. Anyway, it's sort of barely noticeable. But I like that. Great. So, okay. So now, as this is sliding, obviously, the arm can now kind of unfold or fold back up into its kind of original waiting position that we kind of had it at the start, right? So what we can actually do now is possibly copy and paste these keyframes from the start. And let's make sure, though, because I was about to copy and paste this position keyframe, let's just make sure that I put a position keyframe there for whatever value we're at now so that I don't accidentally shift this. Okay, so now let me go back to the beginning, and now I can copy and paste these. And now obviously these are just like a few frames away, so I need to make this a longer move. And we have plenty of time on this, so it's sort of like picks up and then turns back and starts to unfold. Oh, and I think also what has to happen here is the fingers need to clamp again, right? So that was negative 24, yep, and 24. So let's just get that in there too. So that kind of like boop, pulls up and then moves back just like that, and it's pretty good to go, right? Now, let's sort of think back now to the first arm here for a sec. This now is ready to, pretty much dive down and get this second box, as well as this one being ready to move across and get this one. So let's go ahead and real quickly kind of animate the first arm to dive down and get this second box here, okay? So now, what do we need to do? Well, first, I suggest saving, all right? So I'm going to save that. I'm going to select all and twirl this down. And now I guess I can unlock everything since everything's moving. And let me look at my Robot 1 again. Press U to reveal the keyframes. Okay, so that moves over with it. And now we are here. So I need to pretty much make keyframes for all of these points. So I can do this and these two as well. Yep. Okay, and move forward like 10 or whatever, maybe 15, T4, 5. Okay, and now I should actually have a position for this kind of grabbing this exactly right there already. So why don't I find that? Okay, so I guess it's that. It's this point right here. So I can just take these now and copy and paste them over here, right? Somewhere like this, copy paste, and copy paste these here. Okay, great. So now that's kind of reached down into that position after it slid over, right? And we could also have, no, I think that's good. And I was going to say we could have the fingers clamp, but I think those need to happen a little bit later. So what we could do is now, it could widen out the fingers. That might be kind of cool. Why don't we try that? So as it moves down, it kind of like comes here. And what we could do is have it widen them out a little bit before kind of clamping on them, which might be nice. So 16 and like negative 16, just say. It's kind of like widening them out. And let's move 10 frames and clamp them on. I think it was negative 24 and 24. Oh, no, that was the full clamp. It was negative 9 and 10, I think it was, right? Yep, that looks pretty good. All right, so now that's moved over and gone down and clamped. And of course, that's too slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. Boom. And now, of course, what we need to do is parent the other box now. This box 6, which is really box 2, part 3, if you want to think about it that way, which is a terrible way to think about it, I think. The purple box, now, because it's kind of switched hands, now this one needs to be parented to Robot 1. So what we need to do is split this, Shift-Command-D with it selected, obviously, and now parent this to Robot 1 wrist, right? And now from this position, we should be able to copy a bunch of this animation since we kind of already built it. Right here. So it starts kind of here, right? All these and all that. So what we can do now is, and it goes all the way, we could have it go all the way back if we want. So let's go ahead and take these keyframes here. Remember, we have to do this layer by layer now. It's definitely important. And so let me grab these and copy and paste that here. And let me grab these and copy and paste that here. And also, let me grab these and copy and paste those here. Okay, so now it should move up and over just like before and put it down right into place. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And now what we need to do, of course, is unparent that box at the right spot. So why don't I actually turn off the other box just for 1 sec so it's a little bit easier to see this moment. Okay, so when it puts it down right there, now we can split this, Shift-Command-D, right, this box. And now we can unparent that, which is to say parent it to none, right? So now the arm can lift up and move away from it, right? Perfect. Awesome. So we're getting really close here. So now let's turn the other box back on, okay? And we kind of need to do sort of the same thing, but with the other arm, which is now kind of copy and paste those keyframes to get this animation to happen. So let's go ahead and select all of my Robot 2 layers and press U to reveal the animated properties, right? Okay, so now what we need to do essentially is kind of the same thing, like I said. So let me just sort of move randomly forward in time for now, and we'll work this out. And I'm going to grab all of these keyframes and paste them there, and all of these keyframes and paste them there, and all of these keyframes and paste them there. Okay, additionally, now you see the finger opening keyframes actually started later in the sequence, so we have to be kind of careful with this. So let's go back to this keyframe, the one right before, and count the number of keyframes between that and when these finger keyframes come in. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, perfect. So now these keyframes here corresponded to those. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Zoom out a little bit. And then I will take the left finger keyframes, and copy and paste them there. And I will take the right finger keyframes and copy and paste those there. So now that should open up. Right. Okay, great. So that moves there. This moves over. And of course, we do need this to grab and move this out of here before this arm comes in. So we do, this could get a little bit tricky here in terms of the timing. So let's see this. So what we could do for one is have this start a little bit earlier, right? So it can kind of start, so it puts it down and it goes up into its waiting position, and then it starts here, goes over, grabs that. We'll have to parent the box to this for now. Okay, it's still, wow, okay. What we might have to do is actually put a little bit of a pause, a longer pause here. For this arm, just so that we can have a little bit of room for this to grab this out of the way first. So let's do that. So here's that, and here's where it reaches down. Okay, so what we could do is kind of take, let's see, this is a little bit complicated now because this arm moves over here, and that's its rest spot. It doesn't look like I made much of a pause there, so I'm actually going to have to build a little bit of a pause into this animation. So let me go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm just going to copy and paste all these points, all these keyframes rather. Okay, and I can do these two at the same time, right? So now this will pause here, which I kind of need before it goes down. And now I can take all of these, right? And now that this is just a pause between there, and so now I can make that as long as I want. I messed up the parenting here for 1 sec, but on this box I noticed. But doesn't matter, I'll get that right. Okay, so this clamps and moves up, and now, yes, okay, that's closer to the timing. Maybe even a couple more frames, just so, yeah, good. Okay, cool. That looks a lot better to me. So now let's fix the parenting on this box before we forget about that. Okay, so this moves over, and now I've got the parent starting there, which is really silly, but it actually wants to start once the fingers touch it, which is there. So what I'm going to do is go there, and I will Option left bracket, split my layer there, and I'll move forward 1 frame, grab the one before, that's the unparented one, and now Option right bracket and leave that there. So now, once it clamps, that picks that up again, right? So that's really easy to fix. We just needed to change the timings of when the layer switches, right? Not too bad. And we also need to now parent this to the Robot Arm 2 once it clamps down there, okay? So that's the clamp down here. So let me now take this box and split this. Actually, I'm going to move forward one frame and split it there. Okay, and so now this one, actually I didn't need to move forward. I totally lied. Go back and I'll split it right there at that keyframe. Total teacher lie. And now we'll parent box 9 to R2 wrist here, right? Okay, so now that lifts that up, moves it over, and looks like I'm having a problem with my other box now, because I guess, oh yes, this split happened too late, too early rather, so it needs to happen when that goes down and lets go. So here's when it goes down. So now this needs to option bracket there, and I'll move forward one frame and take this and trim that there, option right bracket, so now that should work. Yep, okay, and now the other box now needs to also, once it moves down there, okay, once we reach this position, okay, we could split this one now too. I told you I need to split these boxes a whole bunch, so Shift Command D, split that, and now we just want that not to be parented, right? Not parented. Okay, so that lets go of that there. Now, we do need, I mean, maybe this is good enough now. Let's actually check this out. Okay, cool. I think that looks really great, and it's been about an hour and a half, so I'm going to cut this lecture here. Now I'd like you to go over to the homework video and check that out. There I explain a bunch more things about your homework, obviously, which definitely involves more robot arms, so go over there and check that out, and I know you'll have lots of fun with that. Thank you very much.
If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?